Yo, welcome to my Summer Lair. I'm your host, Sammy Younan, and today my guest is Astra Taylor, writer and documentary filmmaker. Her latest documentary is called What is Democracy? It's premiering at TIFF. What is democracy? It's exploring this whole democracy experiment. We've heard that phrase before. Democracy kind of comes off like that. When you have like an old car and the repairs start getting expensive and the mechanic is telling you it's going to cost you this much to repair the whole thing. And it's like, do we keep repairing it? Do we keep fixing it, band-aiding it? Or do we eventually just abandon it and get a new car? Or is there a third option that we're kind of not looking at? That's one of the initial takeaways. Let's get into all this stuff with Astra Taylor.
Beaming from Pacific Junction Hotel to Earth.
All right, so this is really cool. I'm talking to you on International Literacy Day.
I had no idea.
Isn't that kind of like...
I don't know how I didn't know that, but I totally didn't.
In terms of irony, in terms of the documentary, in terms of your work, that fits.
Yeah, it does.
So I didn't know how to introduce you and your work. You do a lot of cool different things. I'm not actually sure what's on your business card.
I don't have a business card, so that's why you don't know.
That's why I don't know. So how do you introduce yourselves? Because when we were here at Pacific Junction Hotel, I introduced you to the bartender, Nico, and I mentioned a couple of things, and he got all excited. So how do you introduce yourself to people?
I mean, it depends on the context. I think right now I would introduce myself as a filmmaker.
Is that what you consider yourself too?
No. I mean, I make films occasionally. It's been 10 years since I made a film. So, filmmaking, ultimately being a filmmaker is someone who does the act of making a film, which is something I do rarely. It's just my identity for now. But I actually, if I'm going to be totally honest, I guess I identify as it's just such a pretentious word, so I don't want to say it.
Yeah, I know.
But it's intellectual. Somebody who is engaged with ideas and who lives for ideas. And then the medium is sort of secondary, right? So sometimes I write, sometimes I make films. But for me, it's always the work that's really near and dear to my heart is always about a passion for ideas.
Yeah. I mean, even if you had gone with artists too, that's just like snooty too, right? So
yeah, all right. But you see, I don't know. Yeah, it's funny. I don't identify as an artist, and I guess that's because I see an artist as someone who sort of pulls stuff out from themselves, whereas I'm very, my work's very focused on the world and sort of politics and trying to wrestle with things, being sort of angry at the way things are. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting because your new documentary, What is Democracy? You do something that's really radical because you just mentioned like being angry, but you're actually listening to people.
Mm-hmm.
That's super like revolutionary, like actually like listening to people. There's a scene where like you're in Miami and there's people sitting in those kind of blue Muskoka type chairs, and you're asking them, and they're just like regular beachgoers in like swimsuits and loungewear and stuff, and you're asking them about like what is democracy and what's wrong with democracy and things like that. You're asking really heavy questions, but you're not, I mean, it might be editing, but you're also not reacting to them. You know what I mean? You're not flying off in a rage or getting upset. You're actually like listening. Mm-hmm. And that is super, like I said, super revolutionary now. It's something we kind of don't do.
It's interesting that you say that because I'm actually working on a talk right now to give at a museum in Chicago, and the exhibit, it's this big exhibit, it's a multi-month exhibit, and it's on public speech because it's about democracy in a sense, right? Like public discourse and deliberation. And I said, well, I don't really want to give a speech on that actually, because there's so much attention, especially like right now, the idea of freedom of speech, right? And
hate
speech. Speech has been like really politicized, and conservatives are using like, this whole free speech, like liberals are silencing their speech on campus. And I wanted to think about listening exactly as you're saying, and how important it is. Like democracy isn't just waiting for your turn to say something, or like shouting down your opponents, or like, arguing with somebody on Twitter, but the listening is actually a really undervalued and critical component of being able to, reach collective understanding. So, yeah, I like that you saw that in the film because it's something I really tried to cultivate. So the film is not me. The title of the film is What is Democracy? And it's not meant to imply like, and now the director will answer it and just like fill your ears with words for the next hour and a half telling you what to think. It really is me questioning and sort of engaging with people in this Socratic way of like, okay, what do you think democracy is? And occasionally like trying to prod or unsettle them, but I'm not trying to sort of persuade. And at the same time, the film, it's not like it's just neutral because it's pretty political and it's like definitely a very lefty movie, but it's not it's not me answering the question. It's literally me posing the question over and over and over again, so that I hope the viewer becomes sort of aware of how much more complexity there is to that.
Yeah,
film.
I mean, I don't want to boil it down because you just mentioned the complexity, but I also couldn't tell, is this like a optimistic film or a pessimistic film, or is it somewhere in the middle?
Well, what do you think?
I think it kind of leans a little bit towards optimism, but also sometimes would lean towards pessimism. It's almost like those action movies, right, where the cars are kind of dangling a little bit off the cliff, and you kind of have to, any which way you move, you could just kind of slide off the cliff, right? And so it's like you're trying to get back to the safety, trying to get back to the ledge where things can get almost back on track.
I like that, though. I think that's a rad visual metaphor, right? Because to me, that describes where we actually are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think we're cruising on the highway of utopia.
No,
right
no,
now.
I know.
I mean, but a lot of me, my favorite endorsement, when you write a book, you have to get blurbs. And my favorite endorsement for my last book, The People's Platform, was, do you feel we've taken a wrong turn on the road to the future? And it's about sort of the internet and how commercialized it's become. And so, yeah, I think you're right. This film is hanging in that balance. And there were a lot of things I really wanted. And it's how I always work, but I usually have a list of sort of the things I don't want to do in a movie. So my earlier films were rebellions against sort of intellectual portraits where you'd see someone and like you got to know the real them by seeing like what they were like in their kitchen as they made breakfast, or what it was like when they were putting on their clothes to go to give a talk, as though those behind the scenes moments are more true than just asking someone what they believe, right? Like, to me, you can get to somebody's truth if you just ask them the right question, like right away, more than, if you watch them brush their teeth. So I was like, I don't want to make a movie that has this sort of like inside gaze, because I kind of think it's bullshit,
Yeah.
With this film, I was like, I don't want to make a political film that ends with the protest, that ends with this like beautiful moment of like, yes, I've told you for, an hour and a half how terrible things are. But if you all just come to the streets and rise up and sing Kumbaya,
And hold hands.
And
Don't
literally,
forget
like, I started to notice that all these films actually ended with scenes of people literally clasping hands, because it's fake. And so my thought was like, well, what's a film like that actually begins the day after the protest, when the problem's still there, but like the media's moved away and you're like, holy shit, what do we do? Right? We had our big protest and it didn't, that's not enough. So I really didn't want to end the movie in false hope, because as a political person who does a lot of organizing and activism, that never feels real to me. And I don't understand how it would help the audience, because it's not real, right?
And it's not like poverty or racism or sexism just kind of ends, right?
No, and it's not like one protest has ever. I mean, even part of it is that we mythologize things. So like we think of the historic March on Washington, as this, turning point, right? And it, the story is so much more complicated than that. It goes back centuries and it continues, right? Because racism still exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's why I really wanted a film that was hopeful in a different way, because to me the hope is in the ideas and in people engaging and in people struggling and doing the hard work of democracy. It's not, I really didn't want to end with that holding hands moment. And so there are protests, there are moments where you see people, rising up, but it always cuts to something else, because that's just one node in the narrative. It's not the culmination.
I don't know if this is necessarily on purpose, but you were talking to a Greek girl on Skype. It was like a young student. I think she was 26 or something like that, or in the late 20s. Yeah. And she was talking about living in Greece and the hopelessness and kind of despair, and just how like young people like her just don't really kind of have a future in this country, with the economic situation and the lack of opportunities and those things. And every now and then you would include this shot right behind the laptop of when you're speaking to her, of this dog just lying there and just like doing nothing. And it is kind of like, as a visual, it kind of fits, because those are kind of our, like, there's somebody going through something super real and struggling, and like, I got no hope, I got no options, I got no future. And then we're just like the dog just laying in there in the sun. It's like, wow, this is a good day today.
Well, he kind of pokes his head up, and then we just show him going back to bed. We didn't include, but I love that you're reading that into it. Like, to me, I was just like, oh, somehow this cutaway works. Like, let's not have the dog get up, right? Part of why it works is because he goes back to sleep, right? The scene doesn't get disrupted by the fact that she's basically been forced to emigrate to seek, a basic standard of living. Yeah, and so that's, the film doesn't lie and say, oh yeah, there's an injustice and everybody's doing something about it, because we're not. you know? And I think one thing that surprised me making this film is just how much the people I encounter are just actually struggling to survive. Like, we're not even really at the level where we're having deep conversations about what democracy could actually be, because we don't have it. I mean, and even people in countries like Greece and the United States that are really rich objectively, they're so unequal, though, that, you know, people are having a hard time, like, just keeping, like, a roof over their head. And so that's a constant motif.
You brought up the People's Platform. That was a 2014 book. It was really cool, and it was basically, I'm boiling it down. There's a lot of different things in there, but I'm boiling it down into it was just the kind of letdown. Like, we were promised the internet would be this great thing, and it was sold to us and marketed to us as this great thing, and then the reality, there was a gap between the marketing and the reality. Yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And is that kind of similar also to that you're finding with democracy, as you're kind of exploring and talking, that there was a gap between, like, democracy is amazing and women can do things and black people can do things, and then it's like, actually that's not true.
Yeah. Well, it's like, well, and this film was born of that book, because that book I thought you summed it up really well, right?
Oh,
like
good.
The internet hasn't lived up to the promise, right? And for me, the argument is that we've sort of been too caught up in the change. So we're like, oh my God, I have a computer in my pocket. This is amazing. But there's a lot of continuity underneath that change. And the continuity has to do with the business model and the economics of the internet. And so, yeah, sure, you're on Facebook or you're using Google, but it's run off advertising, just like television was and just like the newspapers were. And in fact, these new platforms are even more dependent on the advertiser dollar than their predecessors. And there's all sorts of pathological effects, violations of privacy and the corporate surveillance that comes with that, and increasing inequality. I mean, we have $1 trillion companies now. We have companies that are valued at $1 trillion, and that is brand new, and that is digitally powered, because these companies are global, and there's a sort of network effect and economy of scale that happens. So yeah, and it was like, well, why hasn't the internet lived up to the promise? But the promise was actually it was often couched in terms of democracy. So the internet's going to democratize media. It's going to democratize politics. It's going to democratize, like, shopping. It's going to democratize your laundry. I mean, that was the buzzword. And so the book...
Remove the gatekeepers.
It's going to remove the gatekeepers and the middleman. But actually, it just, like, created more invisible middlemen. And so that book got me really thinking about, you know, these, like, Silicon Valley guys, and they were all guys who were, like, using this word all the time. And it kind of added to my contempt for the word democracy. I mean, this film wasn't born of me being like, I love the word democracy. Like, it's so wonderful. Like, the internet, writing about the internet, I was like, when these guys are saying something's going to be democratized, like, it's bullshit. They're going to get rich. And when George Bush says he's bringing democracy to Iraq, it's bullshit, right? They're literally creating this constitution that's just total privatization and greed. And so I think actually what's kind of interesting, you know, and it started with the People's Platform, because by the end, the final chapter asks what a more democratic internet would look like and how it would be funded. And I think this film is sort of the next step, right? It's like, okay, what would a democratic society look like? But the film also respects the fact that we're not even at the point of really asking what democracy could be, because we still don't even know what the word means. And so that's why the film is really basic, because it's just like, hey, people, this word is all around us, and we actually put a microphone in someone's face and they don't have a definition, you know? It
reminded me while I was watching it, sorry, this is a weird tangent, but it reminded me of Gmail, because Gmail was launched on April 1st, 2004, and Google labeled it as beta until 2009. But it didn't make sense, because for a lot of people, were like, I send you an email and you send me one back. I'm like, it's working. I don't know why it was in beta. And the reason was they earn the trust of the Fortune 500 companies so that they would switch over their email systems over and just like, look, like, we're still working on it. We're still building, working out the bugs and stuff like that. And it was just basically for that, like you said, just the corporatization and get that kind of money. And democracy is the same way, where it's like, you feel then like we're still like in beta with democracy, and like the word demo, which is there. Yeah. Which is what bands do when they're kind of working on a song, but not...
Oh, we're in the demo of democracy.
Yeah. So it's like, it's very similar. Like, are we at that stage, you think, still? Or like, we should have figured some of these things out by now, and we're making like backwards progress?
So I kind of think you could argue both cases credibly. I like that you've identified the word like demo in democracy. So two thoughts. One is, you know, we actually might be at a point where it's just regressing. history though is like this, right? There's sort of forward progress, there's backlash, there's forward progress, there's backlash. So, I think an optimistic view is that we're just in a moment, right? We're in a moment where there's a sort of reaction, and we're going to overcome that and get and start making forward progress again.
Sometimes when you get fired, at that moment, your whole life falls apart. And then 2 years later, you realize, wow, that was like a really good blessing. Yeah. Like that was so like, now I got this job and I met this, you know what I mean? Like,
well, and I think there's a really interesting current right now. Like the film focuses a lot on the United States, which everybody sees as this cradle and beacon of democracy. And yes, Donald Trump is the president, but what it's caused is this whole upswell of people, not just young people, but people of all ages saying, hey, actually, you know what? Like maybe I'm a socialist. Maybe all these things that were unsayable, like, oh my God, people should have health care, should be said and proud. So it very well might be a moment, right, where out of something really terrible, a new consciousness emerges, and we see it actually as the beginning and not the end. Like the car is hanging in the air. We don't know. But I would say on a more sort of abstract level, this idea of demoing being something's always it's always sort of in the in-between stage, is not finished.
Mm-hmm. A little rough.
Yeah, the power of democracy as a concept and as a practice is that it's always in that stage. So what the ancient Athenians meant by the word democracy when they invented it, or what the French revolutionists meant by the word democracy when they first started to reclaim it, with Montesquieu or Rousseau, or what people in the civil rights movement meant by the word democracy, or what Canadians today mean by the word democracy. We shouldn't have so much hubris that we think our definition is the end point, right? We're going to keep demoing and keep iterating and keep expanding the concept. And I think that's ultimately why I sort of came around to the term democracy, because it's just a promise, and it's a promise that can keep becoming more inclusive, and the meaning of it can change, because the word boiled down to its components just means the people rule. So who the people are and how they rule can always transform. So I think that its power is that it's always in beta.
But do we commit to it, or like you had that clip of Angela Davis where she was saying like the system, like once the Jim Crow and stuff, we got rid of all that. The system that was in place didn't work because it wasn't designed for us.
Yeah.
And there's the Buckminster Fuller. He's got that classic line, right? You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like after you've done all this like research and writing the book and doing the documentary, you feel like we should like commit and like go steady with democracy and kind of keep working out the issues? Or is it time to maybe explore different ideas or something that would replace it? Like we break up with democracy and start seeing other ideologies.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, what are the, so I'm totally into the word socialism, but for me, socialism has to be democratic. Right?
You're also partly Canadian.
Yeah,
right?
right? So it's like, so she's talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, who's talked about abolition democracy, and it's and I went back and I was reading my Du Bois, and as I'm writing the companion book to this film, and he's really into the word democracy, but he's basically like, let's base this new democracy on the principle of abolition, the abolition of slavery, the abolition of class exploitation, and recognizing that there's sort of class conflict that's driving all of this, driving racial division that's exploiting workers. And ultimately he's saying the democracy we would have if it wasn't based on racism and exploitation would be really different. To the founding fathers, who were slave-owning aristocrats who created a purposefully undemocratic system, like they wouldn't recognize it. They would be like, oh my God, this is like anarchy, this is terrible. But we can still call it democracy. So, I think the word is powerful. I think the word is so powerful, even if ultimately the world I want to create is one other previous generations wouldn't recognize, right?
It sounds like what you're saying is like we use the word love for like everything. I love pizza. I love my sister. I love my wife. And you can't love pizza the way you love your wife. Well, I guess you can on the internet or whatever. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's the same thing with racism. There's different. You had like a 19-year-old girl, black girl, at one of the colleges, and she was talking about racism and how the experiences she has. And racism, the same thing. We kind of just use it as this blanket word, but there's different types of racism.
Yeah.
And is it kind of the same thing what you're getting at with democracy, where there's like almost different types, or like?
Yeah, and that's one of the fucked up things about democracy, right? It's like democracy means, to these Silicon Valley guys I was arguing with, democracy to them meant I get rich and all of you use my app. and the democracy is you being exploited by me, right? We talk about for probably my adult life and yours, right? Democracy has been totally synonymous with capitalism. That was like the end of history, liberal. And that's, I think now those are decoupling, and it seems like there's a change where people are starting to say like, okay, maybe capitalism isn't democracy. And it's like, well, yes, you're right. So yeah, and it's interesting you said the word love. So I had this conversation with Cornel West, and this part didn't make it in the film, but I was sort of like, I asked the same question. I was like, hey, why don't we give up on the word democracy and come up with something new? And he was like, would you give up on the word sweetness? He's like, sure. Sweetness has been used, and it has been made so vulgar and so saccharine, but we know what sweetness is. You don't give up on sweetness. And very much the same case. You don't give up on love. And so why are we going to give up on democracy? Why are we going to give them this powerful word that people have used to wage some of the most inspiring battles of human history, right? And I'm okay, not all of history, because honestly, the thing is, like, democracy appeared as a word and then was basically like despised for 2,000 years and then sort of came back. But the spirit, the democratic spirit of basically that people should be able to have a say in determining their own lives.
Freedom.
Something, right. Freedom and equality being, intrinsic and inseparable it's something that but this is where the film has changed me, because when I started out and I was interviewing people, I was like, can we come up with a better word? I mean, come on. This word is just so many annoying people say this word.
Yeah.
And not just bad people, but like liberal professors or like people in suits who just like talk about civil society like it's like just in the most like uninspiring, dull way. Like, it's also just boring. I think I used to associate democracy with bureaucracy. It just seemed like very...
Oh, I see that, yeah.
Yeah, just like very uninspiring. And now I'm like, no, we can't let them have that word either.
You mentioned socialism. Feminism is another word that kind of like, it's like a word grenade, right? You throw it into and you'll get all these different responses, and like, that's not what feminism, that's not what socialism is. And people fall apart and they'll defend their ideology or their definition to the end.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. If we got rid of democracy and we chose a different word, we'd still have to we'd have the same arguments. So, I don't think this is an issue. This isn't about semantics. Ultimately, it's about power. And so why I like the word socialism and I like the word democracy, and I like them even better together, is that they are premised on the idea of economic and political equality. That everyone, on what grounds can you say my voice matters more than yours, right? Or your voice matters more than mine? Like, and if you accept that sort of that equality, and then you have to figure out how to live together. Like, and so but I think if we find the right word, these problems aren't going to go away.
That makes sense. And you mentioned your different voices. You had a whole broad range of voices. You mentioned Cornel West. Can you just mention some of the other people, known and unknown, that you have in the documentary? It's a broad range of people.
Yeah. The film features, my other two films were more focused on political theorists and philosophers and stuff. And so this film has some of that. So it has Silvia Federici, who's this very inspiring Italian socialist feminist, plays a big role. She's like one of the spines of the film. Cornel West, who is in my last film, Examine Life. And then Wendy Brown, who's a political theorist. But then it features, everything from sort of elementary school, or not maybe elementary, but middle school kids, trauma surgeons, refugees.
The Miami barber guy was really cool.
Yeah, and the Miami barber guy is, I think, really timely, because there's a prison strike happening, and it's even happening in Canada, right? And have you followed that news at all? Because I was reading the list of demands from the Nova Scotia prisoners.
I didn't see the Nova Scotia one, but...
Yeah, the Nova Scotia, there's some prisoners on strike right now. So the guy in the film, the barber, he was locked up for 10 years, and the scene ends with this really moving story of him basically saying, kind of apologizing, because like, yeah, I was on a strike when I was locked up, but it was only for 6 months. As though that's like not a long time to be on a hunger strike.
I know.
And he says basically he's on strike to get access to the library, which ties into democracy in such a deep way, right? It's not just like, how can the United States pretend to be a democracy when it's got this enormous, disproportionate prison population, like literally people in cages, but then it won't even let them read books, But the Nova Scotia prisoners right here in Canada right now, their 10th demand, their final demand is, we want access to the library. And so So different aspects, the scene, the movie, I think, in its diversity and all of these stories, all of these voices, it's really interesting to see how much they resonate with stuff that's happening all over the place, right?
Yeah. So how come you didn't include anything with social media? You didn't touch upon that.
I just got so bored writing about social media with my book. I was like, I just felt like with the People's Platform, I said everything I want to say.
Okay, that's
fair.
And
the other thing is that I feel like right now the discourse is so focused. This goes back to my whole analysis from the People's Platform. Is like we're so change obsessed. People are like, "Oh my God, Donald Trump is just unprecedented." It's like, no, he's not. He's kind of as American as apple pie. I mean, that's my opinion. It's like he's literally the id of the United States personified, you know. Mm-hmm. And then there's all this like, oh, and it's fake news, and it's like, you know, like what Plato is another big figure in the film, right, in the Republic. And his whole thing is that people get caught up in untruths. And Plato was not a Democrat. And his problem with democracy, he hated that the rich got richer and the poor got poorer, right? But what he thought that was wrong. He wanted a more equal system. But what he didn't like about democracy was they felt it marginalized the wise and that just untruths and sophistry would flourish. And so, you know, sure, fake news is enabled by the internet, but like how new is the story? Mm-hmm. Right? And so the film...
Politicians have been lying to us for...
They've been lying to us for a long time. I mean, there used to be basically like 4 channels. And before that, you know, I mean, media is also this changing thing. And this is one thing I really learned writing the People's Platform is, you know, a city like Toronto, I'm guessing, but definitely New York had like... not just like a morning paper. It would have like 4 or 5 papers a day. Mm-hmm. There was so much media. And then it concentrated down with the rise of television and radio to basically like networks, you know, a few main networks, and everybody's watching like Walter Cronkite. But that's just one chapter in the history of media and how it transforms. The bigger meta philosophical truth is that, you know, people dig falsehoods.
Yeah.
And so the film is constantly trying to pull us back from the news of the day and into this sort of like, what are the bigger issues? So that's why I just didn't want to feed the like, oh my God, the problem is social media, because the problem isn't social media, mm-hmm. in my opinion.
Yeah. Let's follow on that thread then. In terms of the whole fake news or whatever, is this going to end up just preaching to the choir? Like some of the Michael Moore stuff does, right? Or would somebody who watches Fox News, for example, to pick on them, would they want to watch this? Or?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not... So, and this is where I think I'm pretty open about how limited, I don't think documentaries are the key to social change. I make political documentaries because I'm a political human being, and this is the stuff I live and breathe. I mean, I really like music, you know, I really like art, but, you know, as I said, my first commitment is to ideas, and they're typically political ideas. So I think a film is a really great medium to kind of think about perception and how we see things and how we see ideas, and it's also a great medium to feature people, right? And democracy is made of people. So for me, the film is it's an intellectual experience. It's the kind of film I would enjoy, but I'm not thinking, oh, this film is like going to be the political change. I think the political change is actually going to be organizing. And so that's why, you know, I co-founded this debtors union and have worked on like actual economic justice issues and trying to organize people to strike and not pay their creditors and not pay their student loans. Because ultimately, change happens when you try to affect somebody's bottom line. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately you have to engage in like a class warfare kind of tussle. And so, you know, I'm like Michael Moore, yeah, and this isn't to knock on his films, but I think he's like, you know, his movies open in like massive movie chains across North America, and you know, Trump still got elected, right? Yeah. I mean, so that's
what I mean by preaching to the choir, right?
I think the film. If I hope the film is used by, I hope the film gives people a sense of reconnection with inquiry and ideas, and I hope teachers use it. Like, that's a big hope, right? So then that's not quite the choir. That's more like young, impressionable minds.
Yeah.
But
so it's almost like a dandelion. You just want to see where the seeds kind of blow in the wind.
Yeah, but you know, if I want to work on creating change, which I do, then I organize. I don't make a movie.
That makes sense. Yeah, I like that. So there's going to be 2 screenings at TIFF, September 11 and September 13.
Yes.
Are you going to do some Q&As after? Or?
I'm going to do some Q&As.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Are you ready? Yeah?
I'm hoping to have some arguments too, because the thing is, the film's tendentious in some ways. I mean, it's open, and I ask people, what they think. But I mean, I think it's a pretty left-wing film, and it has a pretty, a take on the financial crisis, for example, in Greece that people could argue with, or a lot of attention to like race in the United States. So I hope people ask questions, but I hope they also argue with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can argue with her on September 11, Scotiabank Theater at 2:45, and you can argue with her on September 13 at Jackman Hall, right next to the AGO at 3:15. You're online. You're on Twitter, right?
I am on Twitter.
Yeah.
Astra Disastra.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Astra, for coming in.
Thank you, Sammy. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for the documentary. It was really cool. I really dug it. So
thanks for watching it.
Yeah.
An hour and 45 minutes of your life you're never getting back. I took it.
Yeah, you did. And I could have like protested or organized or something, but actually even worse, I watched it and then right after I took a nap.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
no, don't tell people that.
Oh, that's true.
It
Actually,
made you
yeah.
excited.
Oh, I know. Yeah. No,
Woke you
but.
up.
No, I'm very excited now. I'm inspired. I'm going to go make change now. So there you go. We'll edit that part right out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sammy. You can follow me on the Twitter at My Pal Sammy. This has been My Summer Lair.